As we all know, a good leader starts in the butt. And we learned this, of course, from our friend, mentor, and spiritual leader, Mr. Flip Pallot. So hold on, here we go. That's like butter. Well, howdy friends. Brian Flechsig, a Mad River Outfitters in the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools, and welcome back to another one of our fly fishing tutorials. This one featuring a very special guest. So recently, we were down in Florida and found ourselves on the St. Johns River Marsh on the airboat of Mr. Flip Pallot. And Flip and I took a little break for lunch and got to talking about leaders. And I asked Flip to explain how he selects the proper butt section. So let's jump right over and learn about this bell curve from the man himself. So Flip, I've got my mangrove coast rod, which I think is perfect for this scenario, for what we're going to be doing today. And then my Flip High Vis sight line from Cortland. And as we all know, the first thing that we do when we buy one of these lines,
we get rid of the loop.
I'm going to do it. Okay. We didn't litter.
No, we didn't.
Okay, the loop is gone. You are the person, and Lefty to a certain extent, but you're the person that originally taught this to me. And you and I have taught this on our YouTube channel here. We've taught it to hundreds of students in schools over the years. We're going to be teaching it to hundreds more students in schools in the coming years. And we came up with the hashtag, we're putting it on t-shirts, that a good leader starts in the butt. Yeah?
Clever, catchy.
A good leader starts in the butt. So your butt section has to be right. And I think that we've made that more or less crystal clear to most folks, but there's still a lot of confusement amongst our viewers as to how you determine what that butt section is. And the number one point of confusion is a lot of people thought that you and I are trying to match the diameter of this and this. And that is not the case. Can you explain that a little further?
Yeah, that's not the case. What we're really trying to do is transfer the energy of the cast, which comes in the form of an unrolling loop. And what we're trying to do as that loop unrolls to the end of the front taper of the fly line, we're trying to transfer every bit of that energy that we can to the butt section of the leader. So the only way to ensure that is to ensure that the butt section is a similar stiffness, not diameter, but stiffness, so that that loop, as it unrolls, is not interrupted by something that's too stiff or that's not stiff enough so that it collapses.
Right.
We're trying to come as close as we can to mimicking the stiffness of the end of the front taper of the fly line with the beginning of the butt section. And we're trying to carry that same energy all the way through the butt section to a short midsection and then the tippet. And hopefully the tippet then has enough energy to unroll and allow the fly to fall like a rose petal to the water.
What more could we ask for? Well, this is so important. I mean, I have people that email me and want to know where they can find out the diameter of the tip of the fly line. And you and I have never...
Unimportant.
It's unimportant. So one of the ways that you can test this is you can kind of do a similarity test, and you can kind of lay the tip of the fly line and the proposed butt section, and you can kind of do a bell curve test.
Yeah, you can see that this leader material is pretty much following the bend of the front of the fly line, and that's an indication that the stiffnesses are similar. If you have to err one way or another, err on the side of stiffness. In other words, if you can't get the exact same stiffness, try to have the butt section be a little stiffer.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is that the stiffness doesn't contemplate the energy of the loop unrolling. So when that fly line end unrolls, it's got tremendous energy as it's unrolling.
Right.
And as it hits that butt section, that energy will transfer better if the butt section is just a little stiffer than or the same or a little stiffer. But if it's too limp, if the butt section is too limp, the energy doesn't transfer.
Right.
The butt section begins to collapse and lose energy. The end of the fly line will be allowed to kick downward and send the energy downward, and the butt section will go downward accordingly. And so your energy has to make a U before it begins to transfer toward the fly.
Well,
again.
then your leader's flopping all over the place.
So that transfer, that moment when it leaves the end of the fly line and picks up the butt section is critical.
Yeah. Well, a good leader start, you're only as good as your butt.
I've always said that. I'm surprised that it took you this long to pick up on that.
Well, you know, I typically, a lot of our folks know that I use a lot. And this was, I think, taught to me by Lefty and Kelly Gallup years ago. I've always used Maxima. I know that you're using the Cortland leader mono or mono leader material.
Yeah, you know, I like the Cortland for this reason. It's limper. So when you start trying to duplicate stiffness, you have to go up in mass or in breaking strength.
Mm-hmm.
So where you might be using 30 here with
Maxima Clear.
With Maxima Clear, I might be using 40.
Right.
Or, well, probably 40
yeah.
with Cortland. And
right.
the advantage that I feel like that gives me is additional mass.
Right.
So
and as a benefit, higher breaking strength. I mean, it's not going to matter it's not going to matter in the butt section,
right.
but so that's also very important. If, for example, I mean, you mentioned to me earlier today that on a 6 weight, you're going to use 40. On an 8 weight, you're going to use 50.
A general rule of thumb, it of course changes with the kind of butt section you're using, the leader material, the stiffness of the end of the fly line. All these things are variables. Different fly lines have different stiffnesses in their cores, thicker coatings.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would suggest is if you're starting from zero and you just don't know, pick up the phone, call a pro shop, call Mad River Outfitters and say, hey, look, I'm using this fly line in this weight. I'm trying to figure out what butt section I can use in such and such a fishing situation. And clearly somebody there is going to know.
Well, and also the critical part again is we have to know what material you're going to be using, or we suggest what material you're using. Because again, you can't say, if somebody just says use 30 pound, well, we don't know what 30 pound is. We don't know what the stiffness of that material is. So you can't just say use 30 pound, use 50 pound. I need to know, what are you using? Are you using Maxima Clear? Are you using Maxima Ultra Green? Are you using Rio? Or are you using Cortland leader mono? And then we can determine what pound test. And then that translates then into diameter, even though we've determined that diameter really has nothing to do with it. But still, instead of saying 30 pound, I can say 22 thousandths, excuse me, 22 thousandths Maxima Clear, or in Cortland, it would be, I believe, 24 thousandths, which is 40 pound in the Cortland. So you can't just say use 30 pound for your butt section. That's just not practical, and it's not an educated response.
Yeah.
So you're right. And here's the thing which you just touched on, and this is so outrageously important, is that a 6 weight is hardly a 6 weight anymore.
Yeah, it's closer to an 8 or a 9.
And so if, let's say we're rigging up a flip pallet line, it's going to be one thing. If it's a Rio outbound short, It's another thing. If it's so you can't just say a 6 weight requires 30-pound butt section. It is.
You used to be able to say that.
Correct.
When when an 8 weight was 210 grains,
Right.
and we knew what it required. But that's no longer. Now you have such a tremendous selection of, if nothing else, just core stiffnesses.
Yeah.
So you got to deal with all that.
Yeah. So that's so important. So you're right. The best thing to do, you can do this and you can get an idea per your fly line that you're rigging up and get an idea. And then of course the cast is going to be your final exam, as you always say. If that leader straightens out real nice and pretty for you, you got it. If it flops around or your loop opens up because the butt's too stiff, then you know you've got to change that butt section. But you also don't want to be tying 6 or 8 or 10 different knots on here to figure it out. So call a pro shop or call Mad River Outfitters. It's what we do. I mean, we study fly lines for a living. And Pat Kelly, Ryan Ratliff, Andy Jensen, Katie Johnstone, everybody that works at the shop can tell you exactly what butt section you want for what scenario based on the particular fly line that you have. So we've cut the loop. We know how that goes. You've been known to call those evil or evil. Evil. And now we're going to snell using this tool, which I think you gave me maybe in the 1920s. And so we're going to snell a butt section on there, and you want me to have an 8-foot butt section. So I'm going to go my wingspan, and then I'm going to go half my wingspan. And that
worked out perfectly.
That worked out perfectly. And so I'm going to snell that on here, and this is 22 thousandths. My tippet is probably going to be about 10 or 12 thousandths, so I'm going to put, my midsection is going to be how long?
Well, here again, a difficult question to answer because the fishing situation changes. Mm-hmm. And so let's say that you wanted to have a 14-foot leader. Mm-hmm. Your butt section is going to have to, your midsection is going to have to be longer than the midsection that you would use on a 10-foot leader.
Right, okay.
So the fishing situation will tell you how long you want that midsection to be, because the tippet pretty much always is going to be about 15 to 18 inches.
Right.
Sometimes 20 inches, but that's about it for the tippet.
Yeah.
And it'll be shorter, closer to 15 inches, if you're going to be using a bite tippet, like you're fishing for snook or striped bass or anything with a rough mouth tarpon, things like that. So I would say we're fishing for panfish, bass, crappie, whatever we can get here in the marsh, and you don't need a terribly long leader. Mm-hmm. I would say that if you have a 12-foot leader, you're in good shape. So your butt section, your midsection in this case, you're using a 9-foot. You're using an 8-foot butt section. So why not go with 18 inches for your midsection?
Sounds fair.
You don't have to have a super long leader for this.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to snell.
So 18 inches is, I know that this is 9 inches. So just double this, or approximately. It doesn't have to be precise.
No.
But you do want that butt section to be super long.
Okay.
Because that longer butt section will allow you to transfer that energy further out toward the fly before it hits that midsection and begins to bleed the energy off.
And it kicks it right over.
Yeah.
You know, the last thing I want to say, and then I'm going to snell this butt on here and we're going to go fishing, is that I want to make this very clear that this formula, what we're talking about here, is for what I call and we call contact fly fishing, which is what we're doing here. This is not a leader formula for trout, for dry flies or nymphs. It is just absolutely not, because you don't want a nymph leader to straighten out. This is for contact fly fishing where you're going to throw the bug, the rod's going to come down and you have contact with the fly. You're popping a popping bug, you're moving that shrimp, you're moving a tarpon fly, you're moving a streamer in a trout stream. So a lot of people were confused when we first started talking about this type of thing, thinking that this is what they would want to do for dry fly fishing, and that's not necessarily the case.
I do use it for dries, especially when I'm using attractors.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm trying to get the energy further out. I mean, if I'm using large dries or attractors, I do use this because it will turn that leader over. But if you're using small dries and you're using nymphs, wrong deal.
Wrong deal. Yep. All right, I'm gonna get to snelling, which takes me mere moments, and we're gonna get this leader going. There it is. So there you have it, friends. This is something that I learned from Flip probably almost 30 years ago. It's been the foundation of our leader concepts and our leader builds here at Mad River Outfitters in the Midwest Fly Fishing Schools. But it's always great to hear from the master himself. So thanks as always to Flip for being a part of what we do. And stay tuned because we've got a lot more coming at you. Be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and remember, watch this video and watch that video. And stay tuned because we've got a lot more coming your way.